Satanism, it's a word that tends to turn heads, right? A loaded word.
Hmm.
People hear Satanism and they think cults, rituals, maybe some sacrifices thrown in there.
Yeah, you can't deny it's got a bit of a PR problem. Historically speaking, I mean, it's been used to paint some pretty nasty pictures often about groups that didn't deserve it, by the way.
Right, like a go-to boogeyman throughout history. But we're digging into something specific here. We're talking LaVeyan Satanism,
Hmm.
specifically the Satanic Bible by Anton Zondor LaVey, published back in 1969, that is. And just to be clear from the get-go, we're not talking about devil worship, not in the traditional sense anyway.
Exactly. LaVey actually saw his whole philosophy as a counter-religion. Like, he was directly challenging the traditional ideas of religion, especially the hypocrisy he saw in it. He really glommed onto Satan as this symbol of rebellion, pushing back against rules, especially rules he thought were arbitrary or just imposed morality.
So, flipping the script. Rebellious, going against the grain that tracks with what little I know about LaVey. But before we unpack all that, can we just address the elephant in the room? We're talking the Satanic Bible here. Are we talking animal sacrifices too? Should I be worried about what's under the rug here?
You can relax. No need to check for trapdoors or anything. LaVeyan Satanism, at least how it's laid out in the Satanic Bible, is pretty explicit about rejecting animal sacrifices. And it doesn't involve worshiping the devil, like literally. LaVey actually thought that whole thing sacrifices. Worshiping a literal devil, he saw it as superstitious. Missing the point.
Okay, good to know. No goat sacrifices on the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned LaVey. The guy himself was a pretty interesting character, right? I mean, before he was the self-proclaimed Black Pope, he was a carnival organist. That's not exactly the image that jumps to mind.
Yeah, it's not your typical resume bullet point, is it? But that's what I mean about LaVey being interesting. His background is a trip. And the thing is, he actually claimed that the whole carnival experience really shaped his whole worldview and his philosophy. He was fascinated by this hypocrisy. He saw people going to church on Sunday, then letting loose at the carnival on Saturday night, like engaging in the exact behaviors their religion told them not to.
Do as I say, not as I do. We've all seen that play out.
Exactly. And LaVey called it out. He even has this great line in the Satanic Bible. On Saturday night, I would see men lusting after half-naked girls dancing at the carnival, and on Sunday morning, asking God to forgive them, and the next Saturday night, they'd be back.
So he sees this double standard, and that's where this whole philosophy comes from.
Right.
A direct response.
Yeah.
He wanted to create something more rational, more self-aware, less hypocritical.
Yeah, he was basically saying traditional religions were holding people back, that
Right.
they were repressing natural human desires and then layering on guilt on top of it. He wanted to offer a different way of living, embrace those desires.
And that's where the Satanic Bible comes in. Is it structured like the actual Bible?
It's pretty deliberate how he set it up. Like, he structured it to directly challenge those traditional religious texts. He even divides it into different books. And at the core of it, the foundation, it's these 9 satanic statements.
Yeah.
They're the basic principles of LaVeyan Satanism.
9 satanic statements. That's in catchy, I'll give them that. So like the 10 Commandments, but for, a philosophy that embraces indulgence instead of, well, the opposite. And these statements are really what define LaVeyan Satanism. And some of them, well, they might surprise you. 9 satanic statements. Yeah, it's got a ring to it, almost like the 10 Commandments, but for, a different kind of philosophy. So these statements, they're the foundation of everything. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, you could say that. And one of the big ones, one that really gets at what LaVey was going for, it's the idea that Satanism is about indulgence, not compulsion.
Indulgence, not compulsion. Okay, that's interesting.
It's a really key distinction because LaVey believed in, really experiencing life, pursuing pleasure, satisfying your desires, living in the here and now, basically. But, and this is important, not being controlled by those desires, or, for that matter, by what society says you should or shouldn't want.
It makes you think about how much of how we live is just like external forces, right?
Right, totally. Like, he wanted people to be aware of those forces and then make conscious choices. Choices based on what they actually wanted. Personal fulfillment, not just duty or what they're supposed to do.
So instead of feeling obligated to live a certain way, figure out what you actually want and go for that.
That's the idea. And this actually ties into another statement. Kindness to those who deserve it.
Okay. Someone seems a little, harsh maybe at first glance.
Yeah, it can sound a little rough, especially because it kind of goes against the whole unconditional love thing. But it's really more about boundaries.
Boundaries. Right.
Yeah, like not letting yourself be taken advantage of.
Protecting yourself.
Exactly. LaVeyan Satanism stresses this idea of reciprocity in relationships. You can be kind, you can be compassionate, but it shouldn't be at the cost of your own well-being.
So value yourself
Yeah.
and expect that same respect from other people.
100%. And he had this term he used, psychic vampire.
Psychic vampire. Okay, now we're getting into it.
It actually makes sense in context. It's not as dramatic as it sounds. He was talking about those people, you know, the type who just kind of drain you.
Emotionally,
Oh, I have met a few.
right? And they take, but they don't give anything back. LaVeyan was saying, recognize those people. Protect yourself. You got to put your own emotional well-being first.
You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
Exactly.
So we got to talk about sex, right? I mean, that's another one that LaVeyan is pretty upfront about in the Satanic Bible.
Oh, yeah, we got to talk about it. LaVeyan was very much in favor of sexual freedom, but there's always a but, right?
It's always a but. He was big on responsibility, too. So sexual freedom and responsibility. He believed in exploring your desires no matter what they were, as long as you weren't harming anyone.
Consenting adults and all that.
Exactly. It was all about consent for him, acknowledging that everyone's got their own thing. And that's fine. Be who you are, but be responsible about it. Respect other people.
So not just a free-for-all.
No, more like owning your sexuality, but not in a reckless way or an exploitative way. More about personal accountability.
Interesting. Probably not what most people expect when they hear Satanism and sex in the same sentence.
Right. He was really trying to dismantle the shame and repression that gets attached to sexuality. But again, the big thing for him was respecting other people, their autonomy, their agency.
Makes sense. So pushing boundaries, but not at the expense of other people.
Exactly.
Okay, so magic. Ritual. We got to go there. I mean, it's kind of unavoidable with this topic, right? Especially when we're talking about Satanism.
Yeah.
Most people, that's where their mind goes.
Yeah.
Are we talking like summoning demons, casting hexes?
Yeah. Well, the Satanic Bible does talk about magic and ritual, but it's not quite the spooky stuff you're imagining.
No.
No. See, LaVeyan made a distinction. He talked about greater magic and lesser magic.
Okay, so two different kinds of magic, greater and lesser. What's the distinction?
So greater magic, for LaVeyan, this was all about ritual, ceremony, symbolism, using your intent to harness your own internal power.
Internal power. So not about like calling on some external force, demons or whatever.
He actually believed that all that stuff, the demons, the external forces, it was kind of missing the point. He was really into the power of the mind, your own mind. And he saw ritual as this way to like tap into that.
So more like, what's that word? Manifestation. Is that too woo-woo?
No, I think that actually fits, like using imagery, using symbolism, getting yourself into this heightened emotional state, all to help you achieve your goals.
Okay, so I'm tracking with you on greater magic. That's about ritual, harnessing your own power. Where does lesser magic fit in? Okay, so we've got greater magic, which sounds like harnessing your own internal power, and lesser magic, which I'm guessing is a little different.
You got it. LaVeyan described lesser magic as a more subtle form of influence. It's about understanding human psychology, using charm, charisma, even a bit of strategy to get what you want in your interactions with others.
So less about like casting spells and more about just, I don't know, the art of persuasion.
Exactly. It's recognizing that humans are complex, right? We're driven by our desires, by our emotions. And if you understand those things, those drivers, well, you can use that to your advantage. Makes you think about everyday conversations a little differently, doesn't it?
It kind of does. Like, we're all just trying to figure each other out, play the game.
He was really big on that. Like, LaVeyan wanted people to be students of human nature, to really pay attention by, you know, those subtle cues, what motivates people.
Okay, so that's lesser magic. And this whole thing, it even plays into how LaVeyan saw curses, which, again, maybe not what you'd expect.
Yeah, curses are a whole other thing in LaVeyan Satanism. He didn't believe in curses like in a supernatural way. He thought they worked because of belief or even disbelief, actually.
Like, hold on. So even if you don't believe in curses, they can still get you.
That was his whole point. He said it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Believe you're cursed, you might just act in ways that make it come true. Or let's say someone tries to curse you and you get all defensive, scared. Well, that fear, that reaction, it can actually lead to the outcome you were trying to avoid in the first place.
Wow. Okay. Our minds are powerful things.
Tell me about it. It's like we can manifest things just by focusing on them, even if we don't realize it, even if we don't want to.
Whether we want to or not, it's a little unsettling, actually.
Right.
But it all comes back to this idea. LaVeyan kept coming back to self-awareness. Know yourself. Know what you want. Know what you're afraid of. That's how you live a good life.
Exactly. He saw it as the key to everything.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to circle back to one more thing, animal sacrifice. It's a big one. And LaVeyan was really against it, right? Which, again, that might go against what a lot of people picture when they think, Satanism.
It does, and he was very deliberate about that, about rejecting animal sacrifice. He called it a crutch. He said, it's people giving away their own power, relying on something outside themselves.
So no shortcuts. If you want something, you got to do it yourself.
100%. Harness your own energy. You are responsible for making things happen in your life.
And, he really went after those white magic practitioners, the ones who were all about being good but then still practiced animal sacrifice. That seemed hypocritical to him.
Oh, he called them out big time. He said it was a total contradiction. How can you claim to be all about good, all about light, if you're harming innocent creatures?
Right, like pick a lane. So, okay, we covered a lot here. The Satanic Bible. It's challenging conventional ideas about morality. It's digging into the power of ritual. It's analyzing how we interact with each other, how we influence each other.
And honestly, I think a lot of people would be surprised. It's a lot more nuanced, a lot more thought-provoking than the image we usually get of Satanism. It's not all just, fire and brimstone.
Right. Not as scary as it sounds.
Well, I mean, it depends what scares you, I guess.
Fair enough. But the big takeaway here, for me at least, LaVeyan Satanism, it's really about self-exploration in a way. Like
Right.
really understanding yourself.
Yeah.
Your true nature, what you want, what you're capable of.
100%. And then having the guts to actually go after it, even if it goes against what everyone else is telling you to do.
Be your own person. Even or maybe especially if it's not what everyone expects.
Yeah. And that's what I think is so interesting about looking at philosophies like this. It makes you question things. What is good? What is evil?
Right.
Wrong. Like, why do we think these things? Why do we act the way we do?
It's like holding up a mirror to ourselves, to society, to everything we think we know. And maybe what we see is a little uncomfortable.
Maybe. But maybe that's good sometimes.
Right. Maybe that's the point.
Exactly.
So I guess for anyone listening who's a little intrigued, maybe they're not ready to, start wearing all black and drawing pentagrams.
Not quite ready to join the Church of Satan.
Yeah, not quite there yet. What's the takeaway? Why should they care about any of this?
I think there's something to be said for exploring ideas that make us think, challenge our perspectives, even if, especially if they're a little edgy. The Satanic Bible, it's not an easy read. It'll make you think. It might make you uncomfortable, but that can be a good thing.
It's a deep dive, after all. That's what
Right.
we do here.
Exactly. So yeah, if you're curious, check it out. Draw your own conclusions.
Do your own deep dive. Read the Satanic Bible. See what you think. And in a world is trying to tell you what to think every 5 seconds.
Yeah, everyone's got an opinion.
Maybe questioning everything, questioning all of it. That's not such a bad idea.